Okay, so this is from our last logging session, and it's very close. As I had mentioned before, it is very difficult to get these within less than 5%. If you got them within 5%, plus or minus 5%, you're likely close enough. If you make more adjustments, it's going to flip flop. I don't know if you get that closer with a dyno because more of your conditions are controlled. But if you're road tuning, in my experience, whew, I don't know how. I strongly believe the system, especially on the road, probably can't be any more accurate than that 5%. Now, that aside, I did want to show you how I make my changes to my volumetric efficiency graph here. Let's make the graph a little bigger. And as you can tell, mine is very smooth, and I think that's critical. Most of the graphs I see when people are tuning in their tutorials, they have bumps all over them. They're like rough, let's say, and I don't think that works well. Imagine your truck or your build, your hot rod is climbing on the table here, and it goes from this one to this one and the next one, and it's just climbing the RPM range. Well, your fueling system here says, well, hey, fuel's about right. Then it goes to the next one. Let's say it was too high. It's up here like this, and this one's down, and then this one's a little bit down. And this is kind of how I see these things, right? Actually, I could do that really quick. I can tell you why I see it that way. We're just going to copy and paste this over into here and go paste. Let's just, normally you do by half, paste like that. This is how I see these tables. It's because people just keep multiplying and multiplying. And what I think happens here is you end up multiplying these ripples in there and can make them worse and worse as you go along. At least that was my experience until a friend told me, hey, you got to come in here and you got to kind of smooth these out a little bit and pull them down because, see, this one's high, right? So I'd say I want more fuel there. If I pull that down and I pull this one up, and the one next to it up a little bit, hey, that looks a little more smooth, right? Because I think the computer is actually looking at the surrounding cells to calculate fuel. And another reason, if you got these bumps in here, it goes, oh, fuel's great. And then you jump into this cell, it goes, oh my gosh, what happened? Pull a bunch of fuel. And you go that one, oh, add a bunch of fuel. Your system can't really keep up with that. Or at least you're taxing it quite a bit. So let's revert this whole thing, and I'm going to show you how I do this. File, let's just close it, open. No, I don't want to save the changes. This was my latest tune. Go here, and I'll explain why partly why mine is smoother, right? As I make my changes, I kind of, let's make the graph small, okay? I do want to make a couple changes. I'll explain to you why. I just want to richen this up right kind of through here a little bit and then smooth it into there. I'll show you how I do that. I believe the rest of it, this is probably an anomaly here. The rest of it's pretty good. Let me show you how I do this. I say, well, I need about, I could probably stand another 3% fuel there to get me well within that 5%. So that's 1,600. I'm just going to assume this would have been the same. It's very hard to hit these cells, some of them, due to the torque converter clutch and the torque converter and all that kind of precludes you from entering some of these. I don't know if that's easier on a manual. Let's go to 1,600. And now that goes down to 30. 1,600 down to 30 kPa. I'm just going to add 3% fuel, 1.03. Can multiply this. And this, I'm doing power enrichment, so I'm going to show you my power enrichment here in a moment. We'll talk about how I'm going to finalize that. See, that raised this spot right here. Look at the surrounding cells. This one's almost dead on. So what I'm going to do is slightly lower that and slightly raise that. Slightly lower, slightly raise. Okay. And now I want to raise this just a tinge, a tinge here, and a bit more here. Whoops. Like that. Okay, so my theory that it's using surrounding cells, I kind of helped that out. Now we got a dent here. Now, if you notice, we need to transition from the 35. We need to that needs to come up a little bit, right? Bump it up a little bit. I'm gonna bump this up just a tinge, and that one. Kind of using some artistic touch, let's say, when I do this. Just gonna blend it in here, right? Now that might not be perfect, so I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna smooth between vertical bounds, smooth the column, and just smooth it out a little bit, right? Smooth the column here, that's the next one up. Nice. And I can do that down here. That's just gonna make sure that your computer and your fueling system can keep up. You're not making dramatic drops in fuel and increases in fuel from cell to cell. And I think the smoother this is, probably the better your engine will run. That's just my thinking. I don't have a lot of experience with this. Another thing that is probably not horrible, 1600. I'm going to show you my thinking here, and it's from studying other tunes. The 1600 here on up, I'm going to take like this and kind of, I want to blend this way. So watch, I highlighted those cells, watch in through here. Notice how that's kind of harsh right there. There we go, that smoothed that out a bit. And I'll explain why I'm doing that without spanning the 1600. I'm just kind of, I'm going around it. That lowered that. I don't like that. So I'm going to take that out because we're really, really close here. Let's just leave that be. Yeah, and another thought, I don't mind if this is just a touch lean down here, but honestly, 5% is very hard to get more accurate than that. I just kind of wanted to show you what happens here. And now I'm going to open my truck's original tune to show you something about what I was thinking on that 1600 there. Baselines, original tune. Let's look at that. See, it kind of comes up right here. I don't know. There's a couple thoughts here. Your engine has a resonance. So there are certain harmonics. Let's say you, and that is when the air comes in, it's hitting that closed valve. And when your valve opens, is going by it. It creates a pressure wave, like a sine wave. And if you hit that valve, the right point in the pressure wave, it's going to produce a max power. And depending on the length of your intake runner and your whole intake track, you have harmonics. So let's say that's at, I'm just using numbers here. Well, let's say it's at 1600. It would hit that just right. Well, then maybe again at 3200, double that, it may have a resonance. And again at 1600, that'd be 4800. And so I think maybe that's why we see an increase here. And I'm not surprised to see that again in my, whoops, I'm in the wrong table, my VE table. Why did I even close it? Another thing is, as your engine heats up, you do want to be a little bit richer in certain areas, and it may command more fuel due to the airflow on the intake, pushing air in, and all this sort of thing. So, yeah, that doesn't surprise me that there's a little bit of a hump here, and then it kind of comes out as the load changes, as that torque curve kind of comes down or decreases in slope. So I'm rambling on a bit here. That's just my thought process, right, wrong, or otherwise. I'm going to close this. I'm going to take you over to power enrichment. Now, I'm going to reiterate fuel, power enrichment. Part of my challenge was just the backstory. I built an LQ9. I redid all the cam and did some fancy stuff with the top end of the engine. And so the stock VE table, it didn't really necessarily match the new cam setup. And so I had to be very careful that I got that dialed in well. And the way I did that was I just, I tuned the cruise. Let's go back to VE table. Let's say like right down in here. I got that pretty good. Just kind of tune it in there, driving around on the highway and stuff. I didn't get too much out into the nether regions because, well, I did, but this was explained to me. These regions here may demand more fuel, and your O2 sensors aren't necessarily going to help you if you're using them to tune with, which I did. And so what you need is you need a wideband to tune those regions, and especially when you get into the upper portion of the graph. I closed that, say, down in here in the higher RPM, those other regions. That's where power enrichment's going to help you. Let's go to power enrichment. And that's turned off in the truck tune because I think they just bake in your rich mixture into the VE table. And so, gosh, I'm explaining a lot here. What I had done was, again, I tuned like down in here. I got that well within my 5%. And I took these areas, these other areas, I don't think I can select 60 and above, and I just bumped them up like quite a bit on this graph, let's say 10% here. And then I also went to fuel, power enrichment, and I took this whole thing and bumped it up like, no kidding, like 30%. So the higher the lambda number, the higher the air to fuel ratio. I think 1.2 is, gosh, I should have these memorized at this point, but it's right around 12.2 to 1, and 1 is 14.7 to 1 for gas. 1.225 is 1.2. So I had these at like 1.4 or something, really crazy. And up here, yeah. And so let me get back on what I was talking about. Now I went and logged a bunch of data using the whole graph now, the whole RPM range in my wideband sensor, and I got the whole thing within 5%. And once I was getting closer to that 5%, I could come into power enrichment here, and I could command a leaner air fuel ratio, say closer to 12.2 to 1, or the 1.2 here for lambda on those areas that I got tuned in. My friend just told me, that's helping me, what you can do, and this I saw in my professionally tuned Corvette. I met the tuner, but he tuned it for the former owner. I forgot his name. What he did was he made this like 1.2 here, and then it went to 1.17 there. So I think that's 12.6, somewhere around there for the rest of the chart, because what I understand is down here you are creating a hotter cylinder. The load is much heavier on the engine, but then once you got the inertia built up and the air being pushed through the pump through the engine, it's cooling a little bit better in the cylinders, so you don't need quite as much fuel. The factory one, let's look at that really quick, was the opposite. So here, lean, 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 more rich, more rich, more rich. But they, I think, have baked their higher AFR, air fuel mixture, into that VE table. That's my guess. So we're doing it right here. And let me go back. Now it's 1.2 across the board. So from what I've heard, 1.26 air-fuel ratio, oh, I'm sorry, 12.6 to 1 air-fuel ratio is what these LS engines really like. Correct me if I'm wrong, this is just kind of chit-chat with people, but 12.2 is super safe. Because of that margin of error, you're not feeling exactly at your 12.6. 12.2, let's do 5%. Let's do 95%. No, let's say 105% of 12.2 is your 12.6. So it's holding you within the very safe area, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's our air-fuel ratio for how power enrichment kind of works. Another thing I've done here is my minimum threshold for turning on power enrichment is 60 kPa on the or 60,000 PA pascals. I think that's what that unit is for the manifold pressure. There's kind of a lot to impart. If you have any questions, I put my contact info in the comments below. So I'm really bad at answering comments. But yeah, that's kind of how this is working. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna load this tune up into my truck. I lost my spot I was in. I'm click happy. And I think I've pretty well got it. I may collect data one more time and then go back to closed loop. One other note I'm going to tell you, it's just kind of a separate note. If we go to exhaust, fuel, it's fuel. On the oxygen sensors, my truck was not running well at all. And I chased my tail for a long time until somebody told me to disable the long-term fuel trims. So I did that, and it ran way better. Part of the reason was that these long-term fuel trims sometimes can't keep up with your cam. So I just, I have the short terms enabled, and that's it. Another thing, I see a lot of these tunes never turn on catalytic overtemp protection. What this does is if it thinks your catalytic converters may overheat, it just pukes fuel down the exhaust. I suppose it goes to maybe 10 to 1. Power enrichment, actually, does it tell us here? Engine speed. Yeah, I mean, it could look at that. This is the air to fuel. It's commanding 0.398, 12, hang on, 14.7 divided by 1.398. It's commanding 10.5 to 1 air to fuel ratio to cool those off. That's a lot of fuel to cool your cats off. It just makes it really hard to tune, and it can make the truck run or your vehicle run a little weird. So a lot of people just turn that off. I think that's about it. What else could I mention here? Of course, I haven't touched these maps, the spark tuning yet. You have to have your fuel really dialed in at that point. Once you're to the spark tuning, I think you need to be watching your fuel still, because I would imagine a little adjustment in spark may change your fueling that you need a bit. And you need to kind of do those together. So I tried spark timing a long time ago, and it just scared me to death. So I immediately stopped doing it so I could get better. Another thing some people do, I'm going off on tangents here, is they disable the NOx sensor. This is the wrong one. Where is it? I got it. Monitors are never big enough. Burst knock. They come in here and they'll set the RPM to 0 here. I haven't done this. And then they'll go here and they'll change this to a really big number, like 16. So they're absolutely sure burst knock is not happening. So burst knock, I don't understand it fully, but it looks for conditions where you might provoke knock. and it tries to remove timing before you ever happen to provoke the knock. It's like predictive knock, and it's trying to get ahead of things. And from what I understand, especially if you have a aftermarket build or you don't have a factory configured engine, you may end up tripping this a bunch. And what I'm told, I didn't pull it out for my fuel tuning, partly because my knock was a nuisance, but it didn't seem to pull too much timing, a half a degree here and there. Sometimes, one time I pulled 7 degrees, but it was never in the same cell. It was all over in different spots. I was commanding massive amounts of fuel. I had virtually no advance. I pulled that out, and so I arrived at the conclusion that it was false knock, and it never like hit in the same spot, which you'd expect. But and once I lived, I desensitized things just a little bit. I explained that in another screen capture. Once I realized I could kind of live with a half a degree here and there, I just left this be. I was also logging burst knock. You can log that parameter, and it never showed up on the logs that I was pulling any burst knock. However, I think I've been completely unable to confirm this. If you have confirmed this, please let me know. Some people had mentioned that burst knock may show up in regular knock retard, but not necessarily your burst knock here. So anyways, I got a Corvette build that's a pretty hopped up Corvette, and with an LS1, and they zeroed this out in there. A bunch of people I'm talking to zeroed it out or completely dumbed down burst knock. You do see some changes in here because my baseline is from a LM7, and I pulled a bunch of the knock sensor settings from the LQ9, which is essentially my engine that I built, but I used the computer from an LM7. Anyways, I don't want to make this too long. Tuning isn't one size fits all. I'm having to learn. It's a very steep learning curve. And so if you have any questions, I'll put my contact info in the description below the video. Feel free to reach out to me. Thanks.